I bet you didn't know the creepiest urban legends from each state in America. Wyoming, Devil's Tower. There is no scientific reason why it actually looks this way. There is an old Native American tale as to why it looks the way it does now. A group of Cheyenne girls were killed by a bear, but 2 of them lived and escaped. Those 2 girls found 2 boys who convinced them that they needed to pretend to be bait. They climbed to the top of the tower and the bears tried to follow. The boys shot arrows at the bear, forcing the bear to finally give up. And the bear left scratches all the way down the rock. Wisconsin, Boy Scout Lane. There are several various Boy Scout Lane stories, but they all end the same. A group of Boy Scouts dead on the road. In some stories, it's a bus crash with no survivors, or they mysteriously vanish in the woods one by one. Visitors have reported seeing a swinging body in the trees, feeling as if they're being watched, and finding child-sized handprints. West Virginia, Mothman. It all started in 1966. It said this insect-like creature visited West Virginia. He's part moth, part man, and has bright glowing eyes. He was spotted flying in Point Pleasant. Now, Mothman has a lot of origins, but West Virginia has completely embraced this urban legend. They have a statue up for him, a Mothman museum, and even have a Mothman festival. Washington, Bigfoot. Now, Bigfoot has been seen all over the country, but the most sightings have taken place in Washington. Now, we all know about Bigfoot. He's this big ape-like creature, and he's always depicted one of 2 ways. Either very aggressive and hostile, or a gentle giant who just wants to be left alone. Virginia, the Bunny Man. This urban legend starts with an insane asylum. Apparently, a bunch of patients from an asylum were being transported on a bus when it crashed. The police were able to capture all the patients except for one, which ended up being the Bunny Man. According to the legend, the Bunny Man lived in the woods alone and sustained his life by foraging like a bunny. But he eventually went mad and started attacking people. Some people reported being attacked by a man with a hatchet. Other tales would say a group of teenagers would see a bright light, then be found dead and strung up over the bridge. Vermont, the Frozen People. They were first spoken about in a diary that was published from the 1800s. It's a legend of hibernating old people. The tale says that a poor family was unable to feed everyone, so they froze people and then buried them. But in the legend, when spring rolled around, the people thawed out and were perfectly fine. Utah, the curse of the Escalante Petrified Forest. Now, technically, it's illegal to take anything from this forest, and to go along with it is a legend. Legend says that if you remove a piece of petrified wood from this forest, you will be cursed with bad luck, sickness, and accidents. A park manager in 2014 said he receives about a dozen packages every year of petrified wood that visitors had taken, with a sincere apology and a letter explaining exactly what misfortunes they went through. Texas, the Candy Lady. In the early 1900s, children in an unnamed town in rural Texas started to go missing, and they put the blame on the Candy Lady. As the story goes, she would go around and leave candy on children's windowsills, eventually leading them out of the house with a note of promise of more candy. The story picked up steam when a farmer found rotten teeth on his property, and later found the body of a young boy with his pockets stuffed full of candy. No one knows the true origin of the Candy Lady story. Tennessee, the boy in the bathroom. This story originated in Jamestown, at Pine Haven School. This tragic story supposedly happened there. A young boy was cornered by a group of bullies in the bathroom. He was shoved into a mirror which shattered and killed him. To avoid being caught for committing murder, the boy shoved his body under the floorboards. They say to this day at that school, you can see the young boy's reflection in the mirror. South Dakota, Walking Sam and the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. Walking Sam is supposedly over 7 feet tall and very slim. He is said to appear on the Pine Ridge streets very late at night, and he supposedly tries to convince teenagers to take their own lives. What makes this interesting? From December 2014 to May 2015, there were 103 different attempts of people taking their own lives at Pine Ridge. South Carolina, the death of Julia Lagar. In the 1800s, the Lagar family was high profile. They were very well known in the community. When the daughter Julia became ill and passed away, she was buried inside the family's mausoleum. Years later, another member of the family passed away. They opened up the family mausoleum to bury them as well, only to find Julia outside of her coffin. They claimed that she had only had a coma and she had tried to escape the mausoleum, but unfortunately passed before she could be freed. Every time they try to close the door to that family mausoleum, it finds another way to be opened. They would even try replacing the door, and it still would somehow be opened. People believe Julia's ghost does not want to be trapped in this tomb, so she repeatedly keeps opening the door. Rhode Island, the Devil's Footprints. There is a rock on Devilfoot's Road that appears to show a normal human's footprint alongside a hoof. The story says a Native American woman had murdered a white man and fled the scene. As she fled, she ran into another man. She cried out to the devil to save her, when the man who stopped her admitted that he himself was the devil, and stomped his feet on the ground, proving they were hooves, which that rock still shows to this day. Pennsylvania, the bus to nowhere. In Philadelphia, there's rumored to be a bus that has no destination. Legend says that the bus only picks up people who are down on their luck and in the lowest points of their life. Once that passenger is ready to face the world again, they are allowed to leave the bus. But the passenger will have no idea how long they've been on the bus. It could be minutes, hours, days, months, years. They never know. Oregon, the Bandage Man of Cannon Beach. The Bandage Man is the American version of a mummy. He is rumored to be the ghost of a logger who died in a sawmill accident. That ghost now terrorizes teenagers who hang out in the deserted area of the highway. Legend says that he knocks on windows and has a repulsive smell. Oklahoma, the mysterious shaman's portal. The mysterious occurrences in Beaver Dune Park are attributed to it being on Native American burial grounds. It's also known as Oklahoma's Bermuda Triangle. Mysterious things happen in the park, starting with Spanish conquistadors in the 1500s. They went missing while searching for gold. Some claim a UFO has crashed in that site. People who are interested in the paranormal flock to this area. There was a test done on the soil in the 90s, and the results came back as abnormal. Ohio, the Werewolf of Defiance. During the summer of 1972, the people of Defiance were claiming they were being terrorized by a werewolf. The sightings always happened at night, usually by the train tracks. Some women said that the werewolf would try to get in their homes, rattling the doorknobs. The creature was said to be huge, hairy, and dressed in rags. But after that summer ended, the creature disappeared, never to be heard from again. But the urban legend lives on. North Dakota, White Lady Lane. The legend says a young woman got pregnant out of wedlock, and her overly religious family forced her to marry the father. The baby ended up dying after the wedding. The young woman, upset about the loss of her child and the forced marriage, hanged herself from the bridge in her wedding dress. They claim you can see her ghost wandering from the bridge. North Carolina, the Beast of Bladenboro. In the 1950s, multiple dogs were found dead and drained of blood. People believed there was a vampiric beast in the woods, and they tried to hunt for the creature. The town actually embraces this urban legend and hosts a beast feast every year. Some people are convinced that the beast was just an abnormally large bobcat. but no one could confirm what actually killed and drained the blood of those dogs. New York, Cropsey. The urban legend is of a man who stalked a psychiatric ward or children's hospital. There's different variations. He had a hook for a hand and killed children that wandered alone at night. Every single person who went to camp in upstate New York knows this urban legend. It got more disturbing when a documentary came out and said that Cropsey was real and was actually convicted child kidnapper Andre Rand. New Mexico, La Mala Hora. Sorry if I mispronounced that. It translates to the evil hour and an entity that you don't want to run into while on a dark road. Legend says it first appears as a black ball of energy, constantly moving and changing in shape and size. If you look at it, it'll drive you insane and will slowly kill you. It's also depicted as a scary woman, saying if you see her at the crossroads, you or someone in your family will die. New Jersey, the Jersey Devil. This urban legend has been around since the 1700s. And it states there is a woman named Mother Leeds, and she became pregnant with her 13th child, and said, "Let this one be the devil." Once the child was born, it grew hooves, wings, horns, and a tail. There's been sightings periodically through the area. The state has embraced this urban legend so much, they even named their hockey team after it. New Hampshire, the Witch of Hampton. Eunice Goody Cole was the only woman in New Hampshire history to be tried as a witch, and she was multiple times. First in 1656, and again in 1671. When she died, her body was recovered, and it said that the townspeople drove a stake through her heart so she could not haunt their town. She has been blamed for the misfortunes of Hampton City for almost 300 years. Anytime there is a tragedy, they say it is the curse. Nevada, Area 51. Area 51 is one of the most famous urban legends. Yes, it's real, but there's so many rumors that circulate around it. Most famously being aliens. And Area 51 is heavily guarded by the US military, which only adds fuel to that fire. The extreme security and the government admitting to investigating aliens. The theories around Area 51 are all over the place, and they almost always result in alien life. Nebraska, the poisoned girl at Centennial Hall. Centennial Hall is supposed to be one of the most haunted places in the United States. People claim there were multiple ghosts roaming the halls, but the creepiest legend originated in the 1940s, when the building used to be a high school. The story says a student died while playing her clarinet because her reed had been poisoned. Now people claim to feel cold spots, hear disembodied music, and witnessing an empty rocking chair rock on its own. Montana, Sacrifice Cliff. This is an old Native American legend. 2 members of the Crow tribe arrived back to their village from a trip to find that their village had all been killed by smallpox. Heartbroken, they blindfolded their horses and rode their horses off of the cliff so they could be reunited with their loved ones in the afterlife. Missouri, Momo the Missouri Monster. Momo is Missouri's very own version of Bigfoot. He is said to have terrible body odor, a pumpkin-shaped head, and an appetite for dogs. In 1968, Momo supposedly tried to abduct a 4-year-old boy, though no evidence of this was ever found. Mississippi, my home state. Deer Island's haunted treasure. This urban legend originates from an old pirate story. Back in the 1920s, 2 men were fishing on Deer Island when they heard rustling in the bushes. They assumed the noise was just wild hogs. They decided to check it out and found a headless skeleton. As they ran back to their boat, the skeleton followed them the whole way. According to the pirate's story, a ship sailed into the Biloxi Bay and buried their treasure on Deer Island. The crew beheaded one of their own members and left his body behind to guard the treasure. Minnesota, the Kensington Runestone. In 1898, a Swedish-American farmer found a giant slab of rock on his farm, covered in Norse symbols. No one has ever been able to figure out where it came from. People claim it was left behind from Vikings. But if it wasn't Vikings, who left behind this mysterious rock? And what does it say? Michigan, the little girl on Knock Knock Road. The urban legend says that a young girl was murdered on Knock Knock Road in Detroit, and now she appears at drivers' windows, knocking, trying to find the person that killed her. Massachusetts, the spirits of Hoosac Tunnel. During the 24-year-long construction of Hoosac Tunnel, 200 men died. Death was so associated with that tunnel that it was nicknamed the Bloody Pit. After a brutal explosion in the 1860s, 13 miners were trapped in the tunnel. The other workers assumed that the miners had died, but it was eventually discovered that they had lived, built a raft to combat flooding, and eventually died from inhaling poisonous gas. It's said that those 13 miners still haunt the tunnel. Maryland, Chessie, the Chesapeake Bay Monster. Chessie sightings started in the 30s, but really picked up in the 80s. Chessie is said to resemble a snake, measures around 30 feet long, and is about as thick around as a telephone pole. There have never been any recorded attacks from Chessie, but there have been many sightings of this 30-foot-long snake. Maine, stain on Colonel Jonathan Buck's tomb. It's a mysterious leg-shaped stain. Legend has it Buck sentenced a woman to burn for witchcraft, and as she was burning, her leg rolled out of the fire, and his tomb is cursed with the stain from her leg. It's reported they have tried to get rid of the stain on the tomb, but it always keeps coming back. Louisiana, the Grunch. Grunch Road is an old dirt road that leads into the woods and ends with a dead end. It was a favorite hangout for teenagers until they learned about the Grunch. The Grunch are rumored to be people who are deformed, half humans, half monsters, from years of isolation in the bayous. Legend says if you're on Grunch Road, do not get out of your car if you see a goat that looks to be injured. The Grunch uses this to lure victims in so that they can eat them and drain their blood. Kentucky, the Goat Man of Pope Lick. Now there's no clear assumption on how Goat Man came to be. Some say he was a circus performer. Others say he was a farmer that sacrificed his goats to Satan, and in return, Satan transformed him into a hideous goat monster. Though one thing that is certain is his appearance. Dark fur, pale skin, goat legs, and horns. The monster is said to hide under the bridge, to lure people onto the train tracks, so they are hit by oncoming trains. In 2016, a woman fell to her death trying to look for the Goat Man. Kansas, the Devil's Chair. An old farmer in Alma refused to sell his land to the city in order for them to build a new cemetery. Someone got a little tired of waiting, so the farmer was pushed into his well. Eventually, a horrid smell was reported coming from the well, so the city sent someone to investigate. It was ruled the well was empty and it was boarded up. If you're ever in Alma, you can see the well for yourself. But don't sit on it, because those who sit on the well have said to have mysteriously disappeared. Iowa, the Black Angel. She stands over 8 feet tall in the Oakland Cemetery in Iowa City. There are many urban legends surrounding the Black Angel. They say a pregnant woman should never walk near her, or she will lose her unborn child. Others say that if you touch or kiss the statue, You'll meet an untimely death within 6 months. Indiana, the 100 Step Cemetery. The headstones date back to the 1860s. If someone finds themselves in that cemetery at midnight, they must climb the steps and count to 100. Then the ghost of an undertaker will appear and show the person a vision of their death. On their way down, the visitor is supposed to count their steps once again. If they count the same amount of steps, the vision was false. People have tried to outsmart the cemetery ghost by avoiding the steps altogether. They've reportedly been knocked out or shoved to the ground by an unseen force. Illinois, Homie the Clown. This started in the suburbs of Chicago in the 90s. There was a creepy man dressed as Homie the Clown driving around in a white van, trying to lure kids in with money and candy. In some variations, he's a kidnapper. In others, he would assault them. But every kid who grew up in Chicago knows about Homie the Clown. Idaho, the water babies of Massacre Rock. This is an old Native American legend. The tribe in that area experienced a large famine. The mothers were forced to drown their babies in the river. Otherwise, they would just watch them starve. Some people say that if you sit quietly by Massacre Rock, you can hear babies crying. Other stories say the babies grew gills and fins and survived. And they are seeking revenge on their mothers by luring unsuspected victims to their death in the river. Hawaii, Night Marchers. According to legend, the Night Marchers are not evil spirits, but they do demand to be respected. It says if you look directly at one of the Night Marchers, you will be marked for death. And if by some chance you find yourself in a procession, you're supposed to lay down in the middle of the road and let it pass. Georgia, the ghost town of Lake Lanier. At the bottom of Lake Lanier is a completely intact town, with ferries, a racetrack, and multiple cemeteries. During its determination for Lake Lanier, the Georgia government bought up entire towns to make room for the lake, and instead of clearing out the cities, they just let the water flood over them. There is an unusual number of freak accidents and deaths on Lake Lanier. In 2011, there were 17 deaths alone. People have reported feeling arms and legs while swimming in the water, making people believe it's spirits from underneath. Florida, Spook Hill. The phenomenon that happens at Spook Hill is very real. Cars that are parked in neutral will literally roll uphill. Legend says that this hill is the site of a Native American burial ground. Others say there was an epic battle between a Native American chief and a crocodile. But scientists will say it's just an illusion. Delaware, the ghost of Mr. Chew. Samuel Chew was the Chief Justice of Delaware Supreme Court in 1741. The legend goes, while he was alive, he didn't get the respect that he deserved. People constantly mocked his name by making a sneezing sound as he walked by. After his death, people reported seeing his ghost sitting under a poplar tree, wandering around the courthouse, and scaring the residents. The ghost would pull on men's coats' tails and make women's blood run cold. Connecticut, Hannah Cranna, also known as the Wicked Witch of Monroe. Hannah gained the reputation of a witch in the 19th century when her husband mysteriously died after falling off a cliff. Locals believed that she had bewitched him. They also said she would cast spells on people she didn't like. Hannah lived to be 77, but right before she died, she asked for her coffin to be carried to the cemetery by foot, not by wagon. After her death, the people of Monroe put her casket in a wagon, but when they would try to pull the wagon to the cemetery, the casket kept falling off, forcing them to carry it by foot. When the townspeople returned to her home, they found it engulfed in flames, sealing Hannah's reputation with witchcraft. Colorado, Riverdale Road. There are 8 different urban legends surrounding Riverdale Road, one of them being Hell's Gate to ghost slaves hanging from the trees. There is also the story of the phantom jogger. One day, a driver hit a jogger, freaked out, and left him for dead. They say if you park your car on the side of the crash, you'll hear disembodied footsteps getting closer and closer and closer. People have reported handprints on their windows, and banging noises as if someone was kicking the outside of their car. I've been there myself, and unfortunately nothing happened. California, the Char Man. A father and son were caught in a house fire in 1948. After the fire, the son became so mentally unstable that he murdered his own father. When police found the son, he was so unrecognizably burnt that they didn't even realize he was alive. So he ran away before they could arrest him for the murder of his father. Ever since, they said you can see the Char Man wandering around the woods, occasionally approaching tents of innocent campers, or attempting to be a hitchhiker, and attacking those who try to pick him up. Arkansas, the Boggy Creek Monster. This is Arkansas's version of Sasquatch. He is 7 to 8 feet tall and covered in hair. Legend said he roams the creeks of rural Arkansas. He was first spotted in 1834, when people reported seeing a wild man. People still claim to see him to this day, and there have actually been 5 featured films about the Boggy Creek Monster. Arizona, the ghosts of Slaughterhouse Canyon. During the 1800s, there was a family who lived down in the canyon. They were very poor, so the father would venture out into the canyon to find food for his family. But one day, the father didn't return, so his family slowly started to starve and descend into madness. The mother, unable to handle the crying of her children any longer, put on her wedding dress, murdered her children, and threw their bodies into a nearby river. The next day, she succumbed to starvation herself. They say if you go down there now, late at night, you can still hear the anguished cries of the mother. Alaska, the Kushtaka of the Alaskan Triangle. On average, 5 out of every 1,000 people in Alaska go missing. They claim this is caused by evil spirits called the Kushtaka. They are shapeshifters who are half man, half otter, who lure women and children to the water with fake cries in order to steal their human spirits and drown them. Alabama, Hell's Gate Bridge. This urban legend started in the 1950s. One night, a couple accidentally drove their car over the bridge. It was the middle of the night, and they both drowned. There are 2 different legends. If you drive your car out to the bridge in the middle of the night and turn off your lights, the couple will appear in your car and leave wet spots on the seats. The other, if you're driving over the bridge and look over your shoulder halfway through, you'll look behind yourself and see a huge portal to hell, and it is completely engulfed in flames. These urban legends have caused where they will no longer allow cars to drive over this bridge. Honestly, they don't even like people to walk over it.